Is there a concerted and organized effort to keep people uninformed or what some might call dumb? Let's look into that. Welcome to Trevor's Tarot Astrology and Spirituality. First off, a huge thank you to all the new subscribers. Thank you to everybody who likes, watches, shares the videos, promotes the channel in any way. Um, if you're giving money to the channel, huge thank you. So, in my lifetime, around the time that I was still very young, there started to be this push to use religion to stifle things like scientific education. And if you went to school in the United States and in the more conservative areas, topics like evolution, it wasn't that they weren't taught, but they would be avoided, and they'd always be prefaced with, well, it's okay if you don't believe this. Now, I'm certainly not here to tell anybody what to believe, but was this part of a bigger agenda? Is the question. And was this bigger agenda like a power grab in a way to kind of take the masses and kind of put their thumb on us as a society so that we'd go along with whatever the oligarchy wanted? So let's look into that. And let's start with one particular um, example, and then we'll move on to some examples like flat earth theory and um, views on guns and stuff. But let's just start with, was part of the Jerry Falwell, Pat Robertson, those groups of um, televangelists, were they working in concert with politicians, mostly from one party, to help keep people uninformed? Was that their goal? Was their goal to keep people uninformed? Was their goal to keep people uninformed? Yeah, they wanted people to feel like they couldn't think for themselves. They wanted people to feel isolated and alone, the hermit card. They wanted it to be a complete and utter burden to forge your own path, right? To take measures that were perhaps harder. So if you grew up in the middle of the United States, for example, if you weren't of the Christian faith, you were pretty ostracized. I personally didn't grow up in the Christian faith, but I grew up in that part of the country. And I can tell you that it was, every other day, people asking me, have you found a church yet? Have you, just kind of this religious abuse. Now, did they mean well? I don't think they meant bad. I don't think they knew any better, because that's what they had been told, is that if you're not of the Christian faith, then you're forever damned. So circles of support and celebration, three of them, it just really feels to me like those three people are Jerry Falwell, Pat Robertson, and Ronald Reagan, trying to control the next generation, the Six of Cups, letting parents opt out of educating their kids. The homeschooling push was also part of this. Now, I'm not saying that you can't be homeschooled and get a good education, because I think in a lot of cases you can. And in a lot of cases, it's probably appropriate. But if the push for homeschooling is so that you don't have to learn topics that might go against your dogma, that's perhaps an issue. We should always be able to challenge our own belief systems, right? I mean, if your belief system can't hold up to a challenge, is it a belief system or is it, I don't know, right? If it can't be tested and it seems like a bad combination if these things can't be challenged. Again, three people in the center, this time about circles of support and money. Again, it just feels like I don't know that I have the right three people, but it feels like the Jerry Falwells, the Pat Robertsons, Ronald Reagan, maybe a lesser extent Bush Sr., Bush Jr., probably to more of an extent. The King of Pentacles, this is the environment around us. This is my card for the current president of the United States. Uh, Celebrations, the cards of the people having a good time, dancing around a campfire. The Knight of Swords, this is in the environment around. It's you can't keep up with information. And I think this makes perfect sense when we get to interpret these cards here in just a second. And ultimately we get Judgment. So the goal was to keep people alone, keep people isolated in their thoughts, to keep thoughts that they deemed dangerous away from others. How did they do that? They used money and they used power. And ultimately, they got people to judge other people for their belief systems. And this is currently going on today. This is when we hear, oh, the woke academics, the oh, all academics are liberal, the liberal academics. It's like anybody with a sense of knowledge is attacked. And that is by design. Once we were free and dancing and celebrating, this is like the card from the 60s almost feels like. But then we get money coming into the picture. We get celebrations, but now they seem more organized. This almost feels like a wedding scene, right? Like the celebrations are now around family and not about individuality. The environment around, we got heavy burdens for people trying to forge their own path. We have thinking about the next generation, but in a sense of controlling them. We're going to dismiss science because it's too hard to keep up with it. And we don't understand that science can change as new data comes in, scientific, uh, scientific theories can change, right? And people promoting it are the people that are associated with the current president of the United States and his group. Underneath, people are very tired. It's like they don't have the strength to fight it anymore. But I do think as we move into the age of Aquarius, we're going to get the end of this cycle. And there'll be a little bit more of an emphasis on things that matter, things that are true. So, what sparked this idea for this reading was, I don't know, maybe a month ago or so, I decided to watch a documentary on the people that believe the earth is flat. And it was confounding to say the least. But they had some of the things they said, it was very clear there was no original thoughts. Like they were like implanted. So my question is, was the flat earth movement started to control people? Was the flat earth movement started to control people? Unwittingly, right? I think a lot of them actually believe what they're saying. Yeah. It's to help push a political agenda. Now, I'm not saying everybody that believes in flat earth votes one way or another, but it pushes the agenda that public schooling is bad. It pushes the agenda that colleges and universities are bad because they don't consider this theory. Somebody asked me once, well, why don't universities teach both? the flat Earth theory and the round Earth theory. Well, the flat Earth theory is wrong. It's provably wrong. That's why they're not both taught. So, we attack people's logic and we use it against them. The King of Swords. Repayments of loans and debts, giving misinformation and receiving something in return. What they're receiving in return is a lack of conviction for things that really matter. Instead, people are being sidetracked with these things that don't matter at all. We get people moving away from science. That's the ultimate goal. But in the environment around, we get the Wheel of Fortune. At the center of the reading, we get lost. This isn't surprising. This is what I was seeing in the water. We get a loss of individuality. We get a loss of the ability to think for ourselves. We get a loss in the sense of scientific advancements. We get the card for Russia. Wouldn't shock me at all that Russia's behind this. I guarantee you they're not teaching flat Earth in Moscow. We get the Magician card. This is dark energy manifesting to control things. We get the Hanged Man pausing in suspension in the environment around. And we get walking away from things that no longer serve us, or people getting us to walk away from things that did serve us. So logic being used as a weapon, because they make these things sound so realistic, right? They make the idea of the earth being flat sound so plausible, when in reality, if you have any if you don't have a great education in math and science, anybody could fall for it, right? Because they make it sound so logical. But the goal behind that was to take away individuality, and not the individuals promoting the flat earth, but the people that started the whole scheme to get people to go along with it, which led people to walk away from science. And then dark manifestations to control people led to our loss of individuality, which again leads us to go away from science. Because if we're not using science, then we're easily controlled. It's almost like you can believe anything because there's no method for testing, right? Science is all about testing and retesting. The environment around is about control. Wouldn't be surprised if this was a Russian plot hatched by the KGB back in the 70s and 80s. But we're at a turning point. I think we are. I think we're at a turning point to where we might get back on track. And the pausing and suspension with the Hanged Man is all about people kind of thinking, what's really going on here? Maybe starting finally to ask some of the deeper questions. And underneath, we have the Queen of Swords holding the truth. We're currently in a downward trajectory, and we've allowed ourselves to be confined by others' thinkings, but we're at a crossroads looking out. Notice the globe in the man's hand, which is interesting considering we're talking about flat earth. And this cycle is coming to an end with the death card. So I do think things are going to start to move back towards science. Another way that this has been directly affecting people in the United States in particular is the views on guns. So has there been a mass social, psychological battle waged to keep people thinking that the gun situation in the United States can't change? Is this a mass effort by a lot of people or by the government or members of the government? Maybe not even just the United States government. See the Empress card in the water. I said that's the card for Russia because the Empress is the card for Mother Russia. Get the Page of Pentacles. Messages coming forward about security. If you don't have a gun, you're going to be less secure. Death is in the environment around, and isn't that the truth? How many gun deaths go on in the United States every year? We get victory in the upper right, the Six of Wands. We have the Ten of Wands and the environment around, heavy burdens. And a lot of us have had to bear heavy burdens because of gun laws in the United States. Those of you that have been affected personally by, somebody who's died from a gun incident know exactly what's going on. Those of us that have had to work in situations where, one's practicing gun drills, what do we do if there's an active shooter? These are all burdens that we're bearing. At the center of it is the courts. The courts aren't letting us make progress on this issue. Something's got to change there, the Hierophant. We get the Moon card, things coming to the surface that we don't yet know in the environment around. We get Justice. And I think this ultimately is going to be what leads the United States to come to a census on this. We get emotional messages coming forward in the environment around. This reading is very spot on. And we get the Truth. So, the Ace of Swords. So, messages on money or control keeps the courts from allowing us to get to the truth when it comes to guns. But ultimately, justice is going to have its say with the courts. And that might be karmic justice has its say with the courts, which leads to some changes going on with the Six of Wands, some victory. The environment around, we already talked about these two cards, lots of death around from gun violence in the United States. People having to carry huge, huge burdens as a result of that. But things are starting to come to the surface on like who's behind the gun lobby, right? The NRA's already started to dissipate, for example, and we're getting more and more emotional messages about how guns affect people's lives on a day-to-day basis. So I do think there will be progress on this issue because ultimately it's about the next generation and becoming the victor instead of the victim with the Five of Swords and messages about money. So I think there is some hope that we can get back to an age of enlightenment rather than living in an age of fear and in an age of purposely might be too strong, but willfully believing things that aren't true or easily being convinced of things that aren't true, such as the earth being flat, such that you're less safe if you don't own a gun, when all the statistics point to the exact opposite. So anyhow, thank you for watching. I'll be back with another video soon.